Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We might just wait a few seconds. We've started the meeting 1 minute early and we are being fairly, it's 1:30 now. We're being a little bit careful about this because there's nothing worse than when people come to a session and it's already started. So we'll just wait for another minute or so. In the meantime, I'll do a little bit of an introduction. So my name's Diane Simmons. I'm the Managing Director of Acacia Consulting Services. I'm also a consultant for MYOB Exo and MYOB Advanced, both the business and also the payroll side of things as well. I started Acacia back last century, I like to say now, just, at least it doesn't say, it still makes me feel old, but anyway. We work with a number of companies across a variety of different platforms, and we're specialising a lot with manufacturing companies at the moment. I'd also like to welcome, and I believe you can see on the screen, Tonya Say, a picture of Tonya Say, and also Louise Mulqueen. Both Louise and Tonya are consultants in the MYOB Advanced payroll space. And Tonya also works in the MYOB Exo space, so she'll be talking about what we do in the MYOB Exo space. So we'll just wait for another minute or so with a hope that the last few people that we're expecting join us.
Excuse me, Di, could you just check the recording? Because it's not registering as starting recording for me.
It is on my screen. Yeah. Good, recording has started. Yep. Okay, so just so you all know, I'm speaking to you from sunny downtown Burwood in Melbourne. Tonya's coming to you from regional Victoria, Chiltern, and Louise is coming. Do we call Bendigo regional, Louise?
Oh, we get a bit touchy on that. We are a city officially.
You are a city, but I think it's still classed as regional Victoria. But so we're managing this across all the different platforms, and so that's why sometimes we check each other about what's happening because we're not in the same office at the moment. Okay, well, it is 12:32, so we may as well make a start. And what I'll do is I'll move on to the next slide for you. So when we talk about payroll, payroll is obviously a big topic, which is why we run these sessions. And what I'll be doing is I'll be handing over to both Tonya and Louise, and they'll talk about the different slides. I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you've got anything you specifically want to say, if you can pop it in the chat rather than the Q&A, then we'll monitor the chat more so. Over to you, Tonya.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So in terms of the way that we will do this presentation, we'll chat a little bit generally in terms of an end of year process for payroll, what to expect in terms of the compliance updates for the coming financial year, and then we will jump into the individual applications. So in terms of an end of year process for payroll, so this is talking about finishing off the current 24 financial year. Some of the steps, if you haven't already, and if it's applicable, is recording the reportable fringe benefits. So hopefully you will have had some communication with your accountant to obtain this information. If not, it might be an idea to follow up with the powers that be and check whether or not there are any reportable fringe benefits that are applicable to your staff, and you will need to process a pay for those entries. Once that is done, then it's about finalising all the pays, and finalise in your payroll space, not in the single touch payroll finalisation that's coming up later. So it's talking about making sure all of your pays are in, you've completed any final one-off pays, any entries, corrections that you might have, you'd be aware of. Once that's done, then you would reconcile your payroll. Now, as we said, you can start now. We do recommend that you reconcile monthly or quarterly rather than trying to do an entire year in that mad rush of these last couple of days of June and into the July when you've got your reporting. Once you've done your reconciliation, it may prompt you to do some amendment pays, hopefully not. But then you would do your single touch payroll finalisation, and that's a step within each of the applications, sends the finalisation details to the tax office, and it will then the tax office will notify your employees that they can start doing their tax returns. Once you've done that, then you do your compliance updates where required. So the two different MYOB applications have some different requirements around that. So we'll go through those steps, but mainly it's the Exo people that need to actually get involved in those compliance updates. Okay, so talking fringe benefits. So the fringe benefit year ends the 31st of March, but we need to make sure it's recorded by 30 June. So I do know that some of our clients have actually already recorded those because they've had that information from the accountants a couple of months ago. Okay, there are two different types of fringe benefits figures. There's a grossed up type, 1 or 2, and non-grossed up. And then there's exempt or non-exempt values as to whether or not you need to be reporting them. So you need to confirm this information with your accountant. If they give you a value and say, here's the FBT figure, you need to confirm, is it grossed or non-grossed? Is it exempt or non-exempt? And if it is grossed up, is it type 1 or 2? So with MYOB Advanced Payroll, the process there, and we're just going through this briefly here. We do have more detailed instructions that'll be available on our website. But in Advanced Payroll and in Exo, you need to set up a pay item. So in Payroll, you set up a pay item and you've got to, as it says there, check the different entries. In MYOB Exo, Employer Services, you're setting up a non-cash benefit. And if it's already there, again, checking if those criteria, the type 1 or 2, actually still apply, and whether or not you can accept the grossed up amount value that's still in that pay item, or whether or not you need to make any changes there. And in Exo and in Advanced, you can set up as many of those pay items as you need, okay, with the different settings.
So, Tonya, is this where I jump in and say, and just remind everyone, we're not BAS agents or FBT experts, and you should really speak to someone who knows a lot more about this than what we do.
Absolutely. Okay. So in terms of finalise all the pays, so again, if it's applicable, record your fringe benefits pay runs. Do your last pays. So it's about the physical pay date, your last physical pay for this financial year. Okay. If you have a fortnightly pay, for example, where the last week in June and the first week in July will be paid together in July, that's next financial year. It's all about the date of physical payment. Okay, so you want to make sure all of your 30 June and prior pays are finished in your payroll system. And then for STP, ensure your most recent single touch payroll submissions are submitted and accepted by the ATO. So have a look at what you've already submitted to date. It might be the last pay run. You could do an update submission. You want to make sure, and it might take a day or two to get a response back from the ATO to actually say that it's been accepted. If there are any errors, you need to look at what they are and address those to make sure that your STP finalisation submission will be accepted by the ATO and you won't have any problems there.
And just one further topic on that. This new financial year, Acacia's first pay is on the 1st of July, which means that this year we'll have 27 pays in this financial year. So I'm going to be sending an email out to all of my employees to say, guys, it's a 27 fortnight year this year. You may want to add in some extra additional tax just so you don't have to pay tax at the end of the year. And as Tonya was saying, on Friday, I'll be lodging my superannuation or the superannuation for the company. That way I know it can clear the clearinghouses and be in people's superannuation funds before 30 June, which is another ATO requirement if you're doing lodgements to meet ATO requirements.
Yeah, actually, very good point, Diane. I don't know if we mentioned that specifically, but when you're using your clearinghouse, it does take a couple of days to get to your employee super fund. In order for those superannuation payments and expenses to be claimed by the business as a tax deduction, it has to be in the employee's super fund by 30 June. I did receive an email from the ATO newsletter, I think it was just yesterday. They are doing maintenance on their clearinghouse. So if anyone is using the ATO's superannuation clearinghouse, it will be out of action. I should have actually kept it up. It was either today and tomorrow or up until the 22nd. So it's going to be a couple of days that they'll be out of action. Good timing on the ATO.
Good timing, ATO. We love it.
Yeah. Okay, so preparing for your STP finalizations. So as we said, check your previous submissions, make sure that they've been accepted. The steps will be after you've processed your FBT, after you've processed your finalised pays, submit your STP for your final pays to the ATO, print your payroll reports, and again, we'll go into detail in a little while, and reconcile them to the STP submissions. Okay, you want to check that what you've coded the items in on your payroll setup is going to the right places in terms of single touch payroll. So for those of you that can remember, last July, the ATO introduced single touch payroll phase 2, whereby they increased the level of detail of information they receive. And as part of that, you need to categorize the different pay items, the different allowances, the different leave with different elements. You want to just double check that those figures, along with the gross wage total, the superannuation total, all of that, make sure it's correct. So for those of you, there is a chat entry. I'll get to that in a moment, Paulina. For those of you on the more recent versions of MYOB Advanced, and for those of you, like there's an upgrade process happening at the moment, so some may be on it, some may not. There is actually now a preview feature where you can preview your STP finalization to check those values. So the things that you're looking for, confirm your employee totals, review the allowances and those configuration settings, and confirm the superannuation is 11% of gross earnings liable for super. And again, that 11% super one is really something that you should be onto as part of your end of month process and double checking that the superannuation has been accruing correctly on your pay items. It's 11%, and that way you know the super you're paying throughout the year is correct. Okay, what if my reconciliation does not balance? Okay, there's a few reasons why that could be the case. First of all, confirm that the reports you're using, for the payroll reports, are using physical pay date rather than pay period end. So in the example, as Di said before, a case year's pay period end might be 30 June, our physical pay date is 1st of July. You want to use the physical pay date to make sure that you're getting that information for the right financial year. As we said, review the setup of those pay items, check that the categories for the ATO submissions are in the right spot, make sure that all of the items that should be reported to the ATO are flagged to be reported, and those that don't need to be reported have been flagged as such and aren't being reported. Then you go through, and it's an element of each employee, go down the page and check, well, who's wrong? Who you look at it at a total. If everyone matches, that's great. Look at the employees at a summary, and if you need to, you've got to drill down to the detail for each employees. You can double check those figures, do an update submission for single touch payroll to make sure that the true year-to-date figures that you're comparing for the STP submissions are correct. Okay. Right. So the other part of preparing for your single touch payroll is, or the finalization, is making sure that your payroll reconciles to the general ledger. This is a way of checking that what you've paid through payroll is correct and nothing's missing. Sometimes there could be an extra payment that's made to an employee that just gets paid through the office and the payroll person isn't aware of it, but it's been applied to the general ledger account in the payroll area. So they might pick that up and go, oh, actually, I need to record a pay entry to recognise that some meal allowance was paid or something like that. So again, after you've processed your fringe benefits, after you've done all your final pays, print your payroll reports and then print your general ledger reports. Something to consider here is the way that you post those entries to the general ledger, particularly on the MYOB Exo clients. I do know that some of you prefer to use the pay period end date for your general ledger rather than the physical pay date. Okay, so something to keep in mind when you're running and comparing those reports.
And again, especially if the pay period ends on the 30th of June, that from a finance point of view, the owners or the finance people may choose to put that into the general ledger for the finances, but in actual fact, that one pay would actually belong in July for the payroll. So
Correct.
making sure you're clear there.
Absolutely. And again, that's where doing this reconciliation monthly can help narrow down that problem, because you can tick off and go, yep, all those prior months are correct. You're just really looking at June and the year as a total. So again, the figures that you're checking is your gross wages, checking that reconciles to your wages expense account. You'll also be checking your allowances. Some people have them as separate general ledger accounts. Some people collate them. Again, each business requirement there will be different, and you'll need to know how that's being reported in the general ledger as to which account you're actually reconciling with. You want to reconcile again that your superannuation expense matches the super guarantee amount, and whether or not there's any employer additional superannuation. Employee salary sacrifice is separate in the general ledger. And you also want to check that your clearing accounts, so your superannuation liability, your PAYG liability, they are clearing back down to zero. So when you put in through your wages for the month of June, there'll be a PAYG amount that you'll have to pay to the ATO, and then you'll be paying that later. And you want to make sure that those figures match and that they are actually clearing out. Okay, and then
next slide. Sorry, I forgot about the next slide bit.
Yeah, you're on duty, Di. So again, what if it doesn't reconcile? There can be a number of reasons. Keep in mind the dates that we're talking about: physical pay date, pay period end, how that's being reported in the general ledger. Confirm that all the pays have been finalised and posted or released to the general ledger. Again, particularly with the Exo sites, because that is a separate step. Check for any non-payroll related entries that might be in those payroll general ledger accounts. Okay, someone may have input a supplier invoice to the wrong account and it's ended up in the payroll area. And then do that reconciliation month by month if you haven't already done that, to narrow down which month actually has the problem. If you still can't identify what the cause of the variance is, it may be appropriate that you contact finance department or the financial officer, management, and check if it's okay to proceed and finalise the 23-24 payroll. And by that we mean send that finalisation to the tax office, even though it isn't reconciling yet to the general ledger. Okay. So with the STP finalisation, it is due at the tax office by the 14th of July. Closely held payees, the date does differ. It is, I believe, September. We do have that date in a later slide. And you do need to double check that it has been accepted by the ATO. Now, for those of you on MYOB Advanced, there's an automated process that should be turned on for all of you. That will check overnight if the submission has been accepted. You can manually open up your submissions and hit the check submission status button. For those of you in MYOB Exo, you need to push the button manually and check that status on those submissions. For those of you in Exo that do it, you know that generally speaking, within 10 minutes of submitting, you'll get a response back from the ATO. The ATO, however, say come 30 June and this time of year, it can take 5 days. Okay. I've never known of anyone to take that long, but if you don't get an update straight away, if it says it's still in the queue, just make sure to check back a couple of hours later, the following day.
Okay. So that hard date of the 14th of July is actually a Sunday. So I don't know how many of you actually want to work on a Sunday. I can't imagine too many employees at the ATO will be working on a Sunday either, but just keep it in mind. And I think if you actually did it on the 15th, you wouldn't be penalised. But get it done sooner. Sooner the better. Just get it off your desk, really.
Well, your employees will be certainly telling you if it's not tax ready.
They certainly will, Louise.
Yeah. Okay, so once all that's done, you're ready for the new financial year. Okay.
Oh.
So if we just recap on some of the compliance stuff that went through in 2023, is this for you, Louise, to talk to?
Oh, either one of us. That's fine. So the compliance that we've gone through for the last financial year, we had no tax changes. However, we did have tax treatment codes that changed, particularly for working holiday makers. And I believe there's further ones for this year. The thresholds changed for last year with the termination payments, student loans, Medicare variations. The superannuation last year did increase to 11% and the maximum contribution threshold changed as well. We had a minimum wage increase last year of 5.75, and we had a reminder that the protected earnings for child support thresholds also update, but they actually update on the 1st of January each year.
Why would we do them at the same time? You know, we've just got to keep in mind FBT, end of financial year, lodgement dates. Goodness me.
Lots of different dates.
So what can we look forward to this year, this new financial year?
Good segue, Di.
Thank you.
Changes to the tax rates for all tax scales, levels of residence and non-residents. I also noticed there's changes to the seniors. Not that I know why I was looking at the senior tax rates. Just had the hair done, but anyway, changes to the working holiday makers, and that will depend upon whether or not you're registered as an employer for working holiday makers. Because that is a separate registration. There's visas as well that come into play for that. There's changes to the Medicare levies for seniors, and there's also changes to the surcharges. Thresholds for ETPs and student loans also change, and the superannuation, as we all know, changes from 11 to 11.5. Once again, the threshold is changing, and the minimum wage increase that's occurring on the 1st of July is 3.75.
So that maximum contribution threshold, it means it will go from, currently it's 27,500, and I believe it's going to 30,000 round, or is it, someone might tell me something different because I can't remember, but yeah.
Yes, you are correct, Di. The 30,000 is the new threshold.
So the minimum wage increase that's occurring on the 1st of July, so that's the 1st of July, it's the first paid full pay period after the 1st of July. So if your pay period is crossing over the barrier of June, July, you don't have to do the wage increase for that first 1 or 2 days of July. It's only for the first full pay period for July. So you should definitely check your awards and employment agreements so that you can check the rates that you are paying for your employees. If you're paying above award, you need to make sure that even if those people are above award, that with the base minimum wage changing, do those award rates for those employees, are they still correct? And you need to perhaps speak with the HR specialist for guidance if you've got differences happening with your contracts. Thank you. There we go, Di. We've got some
I just saw it.
termination caps and superannuation caps. So the employment termination caps, as you see, have increased from 235 to 245. The base limits have also increased, and the completed year of services have also threshold sets also increased. Superannuation has gone from 11 to 11.5. The concessional contribution cap, which was previously 27.5, has now gone up to 30,000. And then the non-concessional contribution cap has risen up to 120,000. The maximum earning contributions for the superannuation is 65,000. I think you have to earn a fairly good wage to get beyond that.
Yeah,
Thank
I'd
you.
say so.
So with the compliance updates, MYOB Advanced Payroll, any pay, the physical pay date after the 1st of July, the tax is automatically calculated. The superannuation will be updated automatically to 11.5%. The little caveat on that is as long as the super pay item has got the legislated rates working for it. If that is override, legislative rates has been ticked for whatever reason, which pretty much we don't have anyone doing that. Otherwise, everything will be automatically updated, as also the ETP caps will be automatically updated. Now, with MYOB Exo, there is a new version of the MYOB Exo Employer Services that need to be installed, and that's available now, Tom.
That is correct. Yes,
Yep,
it was released yesterday.
So Exo users will need to confirm that the superannuation updates are in there, and should also confirm that the ETP cap updates have been applied as well.
So just if I can discuss to that, so Advanced Payroll will do things automatically. Exo Payroll, you need to install. When you open up the updated version, it will prompt you to update the superannuation thresholds. You can say no to that, which if people update early and they haven't finished the pays for this financial year, they would want to say no. But you then would need to do that manually at a later stage. So there was a question of whether it will be automatic. You will be prompted, and it will be the timing of when you do the upgrade as to whether or not you would click yes or no to that. The ETP cap updates in the past have had to be done manually. So there'll be steps in that process to at least check it if it happens automatically, but it's generally a manual step.
And I would say to you, the very first pay you run, I would be wanting to check every single employee's superannuation and just confirming that it is really 11.5%. Despite the fact that we work in software, we often don't trust what the software does as part of the automatic updates.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just had a chat question. That's fine. That I'll answer. There was a question.
I'm hitting reply to that now. I'm working my way through them. Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to talk about MYOB Advanced in particular. Thank you.
Oh, missed it.
So with the fringe benefits, we do have a MYOB document is very detailed that we're happy to email out to people, or you can download it from our website. That will be available later. So that we're not going to go into too much detail here, but enough to say that you do need to have a pay item for the fringe benefit, and there may be one or two, depending upon if they're exempt, non-exempt, grossed up, etc., as we were highlighting before. And you do need to set up a pay group as per our little screenshot there, with the dates of the previous last FBT return, which is 22 to 23, with the last physical pay date for 23. So that's referring to the previous FBT year, and we'll be doing then the next step for that. Thanks, Dave.
So Louise, if we set those dates up as 2024, then we actually wouldn't be able to process it because it would assume that we'd already done it. Would that be correct?
Correct, yes. You'd be forced to change the dates. So it would really throw you out. So and I don't know if I've got it. Could you just go to the next slide? I just can't recall whether I've got it on the next slide.
Let me see. No, I don't think so.
No. So the basic steps is to link, for those employees who do get an FBT, you can link them. You can link a second pay group to an employee, which means that then you can do a pay run, which is just for the FBT related employees. And once you've completed the pay run and updated the STP, you can check that the FBT, all these acronyms, is correctly displayed on that STP submission. Just one more click, Di. I just want to make a point about the dates, and I don't recall now.
Yeah,
go back one.
Yeah.
Go back 2 slides for me, please. One more. Right. Looking at the dates down the bottom there, we talk about the pay period start date, the pay period end date, and the last physical pay date. So when you do the FBT, the last pay period end date for this year will be the 31st of March 24, You must have that pay period end date correct, otherwise it won't be appropriate because the FBT year is ending then. But you can have the physical pay date as the 30th of June. That's perfectly fine. So the two important pay period ending date for 31st of March 2024 and physical pay date 30th of June 2024. Thank you.
So then we're on to this slide where we're talking about it before.
Yep.
And then reports, useful reports to reconcile to payroll.
Okay. So we've got a couple of different reports, and I think I've got a couple of samples as we go through this. We've got a pay activity summary report, which as it is called is a summary report. There are other reports that give a bit more detail. So depending upon if things aren't balancing, you may need to go to the detailed reports. We've also got some superannuation reports that you can use, the superannuation summary. We can also look at the STP submissions and actually export those to Excel, and that gives us the information that has been sent to the ATO. And then you can also then compare that to your general ledger trial balance that whether it's you reconciling it or whether the finance people are giving you that information. Thank you.
Sorry, I just have a mobile phone ringing on my desk. Okay.
So just to have a slightly closer look at these reports. So we have the pay activity summary report, and we've listed the screen ID there for you. So make sure that you use the physical date paid date range and use the include completed pay runs. And you can, for the grouping, if you group by department, that seems to be an appropriate grouping. I did have trouble with this report myself. If you don't have any grouping at all, it does not display any employees. So at least group by department and you'll get something appearing on the report. So this gives you a decent high-level view of everything that you've paid out, gross, pre-tax, taxable income, and that should match with your STP. Thank you. The other report that you can do is if you are needing more data, more detail, this one's a little bit heavier to work, but you can prepare a pay activity summary data, and it offers you some ranges of criteria. Usually, again, we call it up based on the date, and it will actually give you a line by line, one line per employee, per every single line that's in the pay itself. So it's very, very detailed. And there's a lot of data, but this is the one that is useful, that if you're really having trouble with your general ledger balancing, this may be a report that you may use. Now, the pay summary data then leads into the next slide. So once you've selected the pay summary data, you can, as an alternative way of summarising that information, you can call up that data in the pay activity summary pivot. So you can move fields around in this. It's a bit like Excel. Once again, you can do some sort of analysis on this, but it's just filtering down that very big bit of data that you've got from the data version report. So,
yep. So just keeping in mind that if you ever want to run a summary pivot, you've got to run the data first.
Correct.
So run the data first, because if you try and run the pivot, it will show you the pivot the last time you ran the data report. So I'll just flip back. Yes. You've got to run this data report first, and then once you've got the data, it populates the temporary tables, and then the pivot will then operate on those temporary tables.
Yeah. But we tend to find that other people are using the first report that I showed you rather than necessarily going into this one as much.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. With the superannuation, we have a superannuation report. Now, this lists all the transactions for each of the individual employees. It's one line for each pay per employee. So if an employee is not only receiving the employer super, but also doing a salary sacrifice and a member voluntary, that will all appear on the one line. This is the most summarised version of the report. And once again, using your dates, it can also be exported to Excel.
I'll just chip in there and say Louise has used demo data to prepare this, which is why we've blocked out some of the years and why we're happy to show the people's names.
Yes,
it's not
just
real data.
They're fictitious people.
Yeah.
Thank you. So for a second level of superannuation report, there is a superannuation transaction report. Now, this gives a lot more detail. It lists multiple super transactions from over multiple lines for the employees, whether it be the employee contribution versus the employer contribution. So it's a lot more detail, so that if you're having trouble reconciling perhaps your super liability report because something's out by $42, this is perhaps the one that you're going to look at, because you'll be able to Excel and see if you could do a find for $42 or something like that. Yep. So the two reports, high level one first. If things don't balance with that, then perhaps delve in deeper with the more detailed report. Thank you. Single touch payroll. So here we go. We've got in the payroll preferences tab, which is not an area that you normally go into, but under the STP phase 2 tab, there is a little button there that says check data. Now, pretty much we did use this when we first started with the STP2 because it checked everyone's employee data as well as pay elements, pay items, etc. We don't expect that you're going to have troubles, but as you can see on the right-hand side, if there's ABN numbers missing or postcodes missing, or if the state is empty, it will tell us. And the ATO want to know this stuff and make sure it's correct. Thank you. With the single touch submissions, we can review the last submission, and you can do this on any of the submissions, not just now. We also have the ability to do an update submission, which you may do from time to time. I'm trying to think of a really good scenario of when we might do that.
I like doing it because it just means you get everybody. You get everybody
true.
In the whole company.
Yes.
So
yes.
I just think it's a really good thing to do close to the end of the year when you're trying to reconcile stuff. Just do an update, then you know that everybody's included in that batch that went up to the STP.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, you're absolutely right. The normal submissions, if you're doing a one-off pay for someone, that STP submission will only have one person in it. So as Di was saying, if you do an update, even if you do it now, you are going to get absolutely every person that you have paid for the whole year appearing on that submission, which means that you've got more information that you can reconcile with. In the very latest version of MYOB, which is 123.1.3, I'll mention this again later, there is a new finalisation preview, and I'll give you some screenshots of that in a moment. So that actually gives us the opportunity to preview the actual finalisation before we physically send it off to the ATO. When you're doing the reconciliation, you'd be looking at the remuneration tab. You can go through all of the tabs, allowances, paid leave, etc., but throw it out to Excel, and then that will provide you with data that you can then reconcile. Thank you. In the new software, as I said, it is new finalisation preview. If you're not sure whether you've got it or not, you can go into the payroll preferences onto the STP tab and you will have it as an option in the lower part of the screen. It does need to be ticked so that it is offered to you as a preview. And when we then go to the next screen, please, Di. When we go to use it and prepare the finalisation, we actually have a finalisation button. And then in the lower part of the screen there, we can see that the submission is showing a batch status of preview, and the submission itself is a finalised submission. So you could do this now. If you do have the latest version of the software, you could do this now, because we can simply rerun it again and again until we are completely ready to send that to the ATO. Thank you. All right, so the general ledger, as far as the reports to go balancing to the general ledger, once you've got your trial balance from your finance department, you will be wanting to reconcile and make sure that the liabilities that we have are clear, such as the child support. So that does seem to be cleared out most of the time automatically now, with child support going directly to, out as soon as we pay people. You've also got the liabilities for the superannuation for the employer, and there may be separate liabilities for the superannuation for the salary sacrifice. Now, if you are paying your superannuation, as Di mentioned, by the 24th of June, that superannuation clearing account would actually be back to zero, or should be back to zero, because you've paid everything out. So if you have done that, paid your super on the 24th so that it can all be claimed, and it hasn't cleared out, then obviously you've got something that's been short paid. Sometimes it's money that's been returned from the super funds, just depends. You'll need to dig in a little bit deeper to have a close look. The PAYG liability usually will have the last month of PAYG outstanding, because generally speaking, you don't have to pay that until about the 21st, 28th of the month.
Correct. That's right.
Thank you. So after having run the STP finalisation, that is basically it for running the end of year in MYOB Advanced. The compliance updates will then kick in simply because the 1st of July has rolled over, so that then any physical pay dates from the 1st of July onwards, the tax will automatically calculate, the super will automatically be on 11.5, the ETP caps will be updated, and the only thing you may need to do will be to update your pay rates to allow for the changes in the base wage increases that are applicable. Now, down the bottom of that screen, and we will make sure that this URL is available to everyone, there is an end of financial year that's available on the MYOB support website. So we'll include that with the information we hand out as well.
And I believe there's some new features coming, or some
Thank
features.
you. Almost forgetting about those.
That's
so
okay.
As I've started talking about, the 2023.1.3 is the latest version of the software. We're just seeing it beginning to roll out with some of our clients now. It's introducing improved security with better password standards, which means we're actually being forced to go up to a 14-character password with passwords that can expire or being forced to expire. We do have better notifications for users when people are changing their details, such as their bank accounts or their email address, and they've made some slight changes to the sign-in page, just so that we don't get too confused with the green button and the purple button. For payroll in particular, we finally have an easier annual leave cash-up process, which is nice and easy, very similar to a termination screen that pops up. The personalised messages are now available for individuals, as well as the pay run, which is a really great improvement. And as we've seen with the screenshots I've given you earlier, we can have the STP finalisation preview. That's just some of the things.
Yeah, with the upgrades, I'm not quite sure. MYOB have had a little bit of a halt on upgrades at the moment, so you may not get this before the end of the financial year. With the passwords that changed or improved security with the passwords, this is something that's being forced on MYOB by the ATO. And look, realistically, I think it's a really good idea. It means that you can't trust the password as we used to do. We used to say, trust this password for the next 30 days. That's not an option anymore. The ATO is requiring that everybody logs in every single day with their passwords. So just be aware of that. MYOB are also in the process of introducing single sign-on for those people that are in the Azure space. I would have to say it's not something that we've enjoyed a lot of success with, and I'd only look at doing that if your IT people are up to doing it, because we don't have enough expertise internally to help you with that. So just keep a few of those things in mind, that if you do want to move on to single sign-on, which would make your life a little bit easier, we'd need to work in tandem with your IT people. So Louise, I think you just wanted to talk about the annual leave cash up or cash out.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to offer you a taste of what that looks like. So the pay item, we'd actually create an additional pay item. So all of you would currently have an annual leave taken pay item that is linked to your entitlement for annual leave. You would actually be creating a new pay item, which is still an entitlement payment, and it does come off the annual leave balances, but it has a magic little cash out tick box on the right hand side there. And once you've created that, when you actually go to use it in the pay run, the pop out, so normally we'd put in a date range. So instead of having the little date taken area on the pay on the timesheet, we actually have a cash out, and it will pop up and it will offer you there a spot to put in the quantity of hours, and it's just giving you other information about what there is to be taken out.
Right.
Thank you.
And just on that, Louise is using the word cash up, cash out.
Cash up, cash out, yes. New Zealand uses cashes up, cash up.
Yeah,
sorry.
MYOB payroll development is done in New Zealand, and New Zealand uses the word cash up instead of cash out. So just don't get confused. It is the same thing, cash up, cash out, same thing.
Didn't realise I was using them. Thank you. Good. I've done my bit. Over to you,
over to Tonya.
Thank you. Okay. So for MYOB Exo, just quickly on the fringe benefit setup. So as I mentioned before, it's a non-cash benefit. For those of you that have had it in the past, your pay item will still be there. You just want to check that it's still appropriate based on the information that's been provided from the accountant. I do realise I haven't changed the date on that. That's embarrassing. I'll fix that up later before we make that available online. So just remember that there's type 1, type 2, and whether it's grossed up or non-grossed up refers to the override rate. So again, you need to check that information, whoever's providing you with those FBT figures. And as I said, if it's set up last year, just double check it's still appropriate.
I'd have to say most accountants that I've seen always tend to provide the grossed up rate, which is kind of infuriating, because in most cases, most of the software likes to use the non-grossed up rate. So just be really aware of what your accountant's actually providing you.
My handy hint is to ask them for both figures.
Oh, that's a good idea. Absolutely.
And then there was no confusion.
Yeah.
And so when you record the fringe benefits payment, you need to make sure that the physical pay date is the 31st of March 2024. That is different to what was shown in advance. So please make note, if you're MYOB Exo payroll, your physical pay date must be 31st of March, because that's the end of the fringe benefits year. The pay period end date, it's just easier if it happens to be the same. The pay period start date, you can ignore. Okay, in Exo, we don't have an annual one. Our people are assigned to whether it be weekly, monthly, or fortnightly pay. So you want to focus on pay period end and physical pay date. You also want to tick the box do not send to ATO. So this is done as a one-off payment. So we do have that tick box to say do not send it to the ATO. The reason being the ATO will reject it. So there'll be nothing wrong with it. They will reject it because the date is old. So with the single touch payroll submissions, each submission sends year-to-date information to the ATO. So if they have a submission for an employee for pays dated the 23rd of June, them getting something dated 31st of March is older in their mind and therefore not up to date. So just easiest if you don't tick it. When you then do an update submission or your finalization, it will be included. Okay, reports to reconcile payroll. So we will have a link to MYOB's website. It will go through these reports in a lot more detail. I like the pay summary by company and by employee. By company is obviously a good summary just as a total, and if you need to, you can do it by summary, by employee, and it can show you then what their breakup is. I often suggest printing off the payroll trial balance. It doesn't by default include superannuation, and sometimes if there's additional PAYG being deducted, it includes it in the deduction column rather than PAYG. But just for complete, I like to include it in that suite of reports and make sure the overall gross wages total does match to the pay summary. There is then the superannuation summary report, which is quite a nice report that lists all of the employees, what their total gross earnings are and their gross earnings liable for superannuation. So there may be situations where people are earning perhaps overtime that's not part of their ordinary time earnings and they're not entitled to superannuation on that. So the super summary is a good report to give that information. And then there's a general ledger report within Exo Payroll, which will actually show you what general ledger accounts each of the pay was being posted to when you post it into your Exo business software. Or if you're using a different software package, it'll show you what it was linked to. So that's often handy when you're doing your reconciliation. So when we do those, so next slide, please, Di. So the pay summary report, as I said, I like to do it by company and then do the employee details. The company is a good one for a quick reconciliation to the general ledger. If the wages matches, the allowance matches, the super matches to the general ledger, you may not need to go any further than that. It'll tick all the balance boxes and we're good to go. The pay summary by employee is a good one to reconcile to the single touch payroll data to make sure that that information, each of the different categories have gone into the appropriate spots within single touch payroll phase 2.
Sorry, I was just responding. Just responding to
thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. The payroll trial balance. As I said, it's just a good one to have in there. The screenshots are a little small, but just a reminder to go into the report options and make sure it's by physical pay date, not pay period end. Yeah, I don't know if you could zoom in there.
I don't think I
that
can
little
zoom
one
in.
there. Yep, that's
that
correct.
Tiny little one there. No, I don't know that I can.
Now I have said in my notes there, you can run the report filtered by cost center or department if that's going to help you with reconciling to the general ledger.
That's up there.
Because this doesn't include superannuation, I would suggest perhaps even using the pay summary filtered by cost center or department to help you with that general ledger reconciliation. Okay. So the superannuation summary. So you may be able to see in there in the report in the columns, it's got an earnings column and the earnings liable, and then it's got the employer contribution, and you want to be checking that that's 11% of the earnings liable. And if the earnings liable doesn't match to the total earnings, you actually checking, well, why is that the case? Does that seem legitimate? Is there payments that, as I said, aren't classed as ordinary time earnings? We'll also mention in there the salary sacrifice contributions. That's a good thing just to cast your eye over, or if there's additional contributions there.
And with that report, Ton, you can pop that out to Excel, can't you?
Yes, absolutely. So each of the Exo payroll reports can be exported to Excel. That export process, the format of how it appears in Excel will be a little bit different to what you see on the screen because you can actually design where those columns appear in that export and how it actually looks. But yes, they definitely can go to Excel. And that's a good one also for reconciling to the general ledger. If we can jump
Funny you
that
should
side,
say
okay.
that. Funny you should say that.
Yeah. And then there's the general ledger. So I've got in there running the general ledger report from Payroll. That's usually probably my go-to if there's a problem. I like, as I said, the pay summary report, reconcile that to the general ledger. If that's not reconciling, break it down month by month, but also that general ledger report from Payroll, so we can see what GL accounts was it using. That can be run in both summary and detail, so that if we need to, we can explode it out and look at a particular general ledger code and see, as sometimes happens, might have superannuation posting to the wages expense account because the cost center code linked to superannuation hasn't been updated. And now the screenshot I've got there is of the trial balance tree in Exo Business. Of course, you might use a balance sheet report or trial balance, profit and loss. I just find that the trial balance tree is a good interactive tool to utilize there.
I do too.
Okay. And then the STP data. So MYOB Exo does not have a preview option, unfortunately. What we do have is an update submission. Now, our update submission will include both active and inactive employees. It'll do it for the current financial year. So very importantly, if you want to do it, even if you're not sure, perhaps run it 30 June before you start in the new financial year. Okay, so at least it's there. It will send the data through to the ATO, but it will be the year-to-date information, and it will include all of the different payments for all your staff so that you can actually double check from those other reports through to what's been going into the single touch payroll. Okay. Yep. So with the compliance updates for Exo, as we said, there will be a new version that will need to be downloaded and installed. It is recommended that that is done on the server where the application is actually installed. Some people, due to security permissions, if they try to run it from their workstation over across onto the server, so they recognize that payroll's over on the server, security permissions may mean it doesn't actually install properly. So it's best if it's run directly on the server. And it will need to be run under a login under a computer login that's got sufficient privileges. Once that's installed and the database itself is upgraded, as I mentioned, when you open it, you'll be prompted for the superannuation update. I think that'll happen when you do your first pay run. You would click yes. The ETP changes, there'll be steps online as to how you go and double check that. That will need to be done manually. It'll only be any new files that will get the updated information automatically. So you'll have to update the ETP changes and then update any pay rates with the pay increase if you need to. We've just got that mentioned there as well.
One of the quickest way you know that you haven't done an update or that you haven't got the latest version, you try and process a payroll with a pay date of July, and guess what? There's no tax taken out. That's how you know that you haven't loaded the latest version. So that's why it's really important for you to check those reports, the first payroll reports, to check that it is 11.5% and that there is tax being taken out. Because if either of those two are not happening, then probably you haven't got the latest version.
That's correct. Yep, absolutely.
And
now,
Tonya, Sarah's just asked, does it matter if we do the update prior to completing the last pay run? It's fine.
Yeah, correct. You can definitely do the update before finishing off the 24 financial year. You just want to be aware that if you've still got pays to process for prior to 30 June as the date, you don't want to click 11.5% on the super. You want to make sure you hit no. Because superannuation is calculated quarterly in terms of that maximum earnings, it will actually do a double check for the full quarter. Okay, so you definitely want to make sure you hit no on that. But that's not a problem otherwise, having it available, the newest version. The tax scales for the current year will still exist, as will the future year. And then when you come to do your July pay run, you'll just have to manually update your superannuation. Now, we did also have a question about how do we know which version we're on? And I thought that I had a slide to show you, but I haven't. So I will include that in there, but it's just when you're in the Exo Payroll application, clicking on help and about, but I will make sure I include a slide before we put this up on the web showing you how to double check what version you are on.
Good. So then we come to a little bit of a sticky topic, which I'll cover, and that is the end of life for Exo Payroll. So MYOB will stop supporting the Exo Employer Services Payroll in November 2025. So we need you all to start, and those people that are on the Exo payroll, you people that are on Advanced, you can sit back, cross your arms and have a cigar because you're fine. You really need to start thinking now about what payroll solutions you might be looking for. Ryan Addison from our office will be contacting you. Ryan works with me to discuss what you're thinking about. There's probably no need to hurry, but there is a need to hurry because, quite frankly, we can't deal with everyone's payroll in June 2025. Let me tell you, Louise will have a heart attack or kill me, one of the two, given that she's just installed 7 payrolls in the last 2 months. So please do not leave it too long. Talk to us about what your plans are. So at least we know that if you're considering moving to a different platform, we know that we'll leave you alone. We won't harass you. But if you are considering going to MYOB Advanced and looking at that as an alternate, that we actually spend a little bit of time with you now rather than later on. Okay. And keep in mind, Louise will throttle me if you all leave it too long. So to recap, when you're doing your end of year, make sure you process those fringe benefits transactions prior to the last pay or prior to submitting your STP stuff. Make sure that when you're doing it, you've got a period end date of the 31st of March 2024. Make sure you complete your reconciliations prior to submitting those final declarations to the ATO. It's really important that you do that. In my case, I end up setting up a massive big Excel spreadsheet with lots and lots of different tabs on the bottom, so that if the ATO or the State Revenue Office or WorkCare come back to me, I've got it all in one Excel spreadsheet with lots and lots of tabs down the bottom and with the pages referring to the different things. The STP finalisation date is the 14th of July and closely held employees by the 30th of September. Pauline's just asked a really important question, which I didn't address, Paulina, and that is Exo Business is not end of life. Exo Business, I was in Sydney on Tuesday talking to MYOB about what are the dates for end of life on Exo, and there are no intentions to sunset Exo at this stage. MYOB have a common standing that they will always allow at least 2 years, which is what they've done with the payroll. They notified us with the payroll. So they'll always have at least 2 years prior to sunsetting a product. And in a lot of cases, what does that mean if they sunset it? Payrolls are probably more important than because there's a lot of compliance stuff in it. But basically what it means is that they won't be making any changes to the software. So you'll still be able to use the business software, but if they then start to enforce that we've all got to go to online STP reporting or online e-invoicing, then that's when we'll start to hit a few sticky wickets. So Exo Business is still go for go. We've got still 60 plus clients using Exo Business. Some of them have considered moving across to Advanced. Or are considering it as we speak. And I think some of the 7 that Louise has worked with have been part of that process to transition. But look, speak to us about it. Speak to us about what your requirements are and what you're looking for. But I imagine it'll be around for quite some time yet. The number of clients that MYOB has on Exo is huge, and the functionality set between Exo and Advanced is lacking in the job costing area. So if you're using job costing, we probably need to talk to you in a little bit more detail about what your requirements are. And we probably couldn't consider you going to MYOB Advanced at this stage. And look, please, if you want to have a chat with me, just send me an email. So I'll also recap around the Tanya's just sending me a text message saying, hurry up, you're talking too long. Compliance stuff, don't forget, we've said this 1,000,000,001 times. It's the increase in superannuation to 11.5%, the increase in the maximum earnings base, the changes in the termination payment cap, your minimum wages, be really careful about. I've read some horrific stories. I subscribe to the Fair Work Ombudsman's newsletter. So every day I get a newsletter. Today's was someone's been fined $16 million for underpaying their employees. I look at this and I just get so concerned, and also the protected earnings. So just be aware about that. If you want to talk to us, please talk to us about payroll. Advanced payroll. And the last slide, Tonya, you'll be pleased to know. Look, reach out to us, speak to Help Desk if you can't speak to Tonya or Louise or myself, or Help Desk or Ryan. We will run this webinar on our website. And the last note is MYOB will be running what's called a Discover webinar. These webinars are mostly directed at the MYOB Advanced clients because it talks about all the new features that are coming up in Advanced. It's being run on Tuesday, the 16th of July, and as a little bit of a preview, I might have a little bit of a cameo role appearing in there. So come along and have a look at it, and because there's a lot of exciting announcements as part of that. So I'd really strongly encourage you to register for the Discover webinar, even if you're on Exo, just so you know what MYOB are up to. So at that note, I should have a thank you slide. We forgot the thank you slide, everybody. So we'd just like to say thank you to you all for attending, and in fact, I'll stop sharing. We will be sharing the video of this on our website, and also copies of the slides. And, you know, if you need anything, just yell out, please, because we'd prefer you to do it right the first time rather than do it right twice, or do it wrong once and right once. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming along. Let us know. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And Ying Ying, I will respond to you directly on your last question.
Yeah.